Welcome to the Mindset Gym podcast, where we exercise your way of thinking to help unlock your hidden potential. I'm your host, Emily Irwin, a registered nurse and holistic nutritionist with a passion for all things health, fitness, and personal development. All right, let's get into it. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Mindset Gym podcast. I am so excited to be back here recording again. It feels kind of surreal that I'm already on episode 3 of this. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you. I look forward to having you join us on the show. And if you're coming back from one of the previous episodes, thank you so much for your support. This has been really incredible to kind of see this all start to come together after all the time of planning. So let's get straight into it. This week we're going to be talking about failure. Now, I think failure is something that a lot of people tend to get wrong. We tend to think of this as a really negative thing and something that we need to go out of our way to avoid at all costs. And when we think about that, it kind of makes sense that failure is something that we try to avoid because, if we look back through history, this is something that we're kind of hardwired to do. So thousands of years ago, when we were relying on hunting and gathering to gather our food and living without all the resources that we have today, failure was a threat to our survival. So if you were in charge of hunting for food to feed your family or trying to run away from a lion, failing at that would be really detrimental. It isn't something that you can just, brush off, continue through your day. It could really mean the end of your life. So due to those circumstances, the structure of our brain evolved to avoid failure and seek out situations in which we're more likely to win. This evolution has also created a massive amount of discomfort around failure. The prolonged period of time in which failure was such a threat to our survival has left us with this fear response around failure that makes us feel as threatened as if we're being chased by a wild predator. The problem with this is that we're missing out on a huge opportunity because, we live in a day and age now where failure does not mean a threat to our survival. There is actually a lot of opportunity in failure. So the way that we can utilize failure now is not viewing it as this negative thing that we need to punish ourselves for. It's actually a really great opportunity for growth. Failure contains clues about how we can adjust and adapt and come back better the next time around. So just because failure no longer means a threat to our survival, it doesn't mean that discomfort is still there. That anxiety and that fear around failure still exists. So what can we do to overcome this and actually utilize failure as the useful tool that it now is? Learning to embrace failure will help to unlock new levels of growth that you may not have been able to lean into before. And there are ways that we can work our mindset around failure in order to make it feel a lot less scary and overwhelming. So the first thing that we can do is if we are going into a project or a new territory, something that we're not really certain of, instead of looking for a win or hoping for it all to just work out perfectly, make it your goal to fail. And this sounds a little bit funny, but seek it out. Plan to fail, hope to fail, and see that as a mark of success. Start reframing failure as a guidepost for things that you can improve on and an opportunity to reach a new level of performance. I'll give you an example that really helped to solidify this lesson for me. So when I started lifting weights, I would avoid failing my lifts at all costs. So I would do this by going in each week and I would pick the same weights and I would do the same rep ranges because I knew I could do that. I knew it wasn't something I was going to fail at and I felt safe sticking in that little window that I was comfortable with. So a couple of years back, I switched to a new gym and I had the opportunity to meet with a personal trainer. And she went through my current training regime and I was telling her what I had been doing. And she asked me a question. She said, do you ever increase your weights from week to week? Do you ever try and improve on what you're doing? And I said, no, I don't. And she asked me why. And I really didn't have an answer for her. It kind of stunned me because I hadn't really thought about it up until that point. I was just doing what I felt comfortable with. And so I said, I don't really know. I don't know why I'm doing that. And she was like, well, there's a lot of growth. Like you could make a lot of progress if you were willing to push yourself week to week and do a little bit more because I think you're capable of it. And so that really got me thinking about how I'd been approaching fitness up until that point and how I'd been approaching failure. And so going into the following weeks, I started to push myself more and more. And I would, purposely pick up weights that I wasn't used to, start going for more reps, and start pushing myself to a point where I did actually fail. Now, I don't think we need to start a debate on whether failure training is necessary or not. I know there's a lot of arguments out there, and this is not the topic of this podcast. I'm not here to talk about that. I don't think it's something you need to do all the time, but it was definitely a tool that helped me kind of progress in a way, because being able to lean into it and see it as a good thing allowed me to push myself in a way that I wasn't willing to before. It allowed me to kind of push the limits of what I was capable of without that fear of failing, and being able to see that as, you know, a sign that I was moving in the right direction. The reason I found this so helpful was because allowing myself to push myself to a point of failure, it allowed me to grow and adapt, and I ended up seeing a lot more progress than I had seen, you know, years prior to that, because I hadn't been pushing myself in the same way. And it gives you a lot of really valuable information about what your upper limits are and things that you can improve on going forward. So I began kind of leaning into failure in this regard. Instead of choosing things that I knew I could do, I would aim to kind of progressively challenge myself week to week and get a little bit better every time. The shift in mindset led to a ton of new growth and perspective around failure itself, and I was able to start seeing it as a much more valuable thing, and I was able to see the progress that I was making as a result of leaning into it. So the next thing that I think is really important is to not dwell on failure. When we fail at anything in life, whether it's, you know, failing a test at school, messing up on something at work, or slipping back into an old habit that we're trying to avoid. Let's say you're trying to cut back on your alcohol intake, or you're trying to stick to a certain diet and you have a couple of drinks one night that you don't mean to have, or you eat something off your diet plan, something that feels like a sense of failure to you. We tend to get into this shame spiral and kind of dwell on the negativity of it. And we get stuck in this shame and anxiety that can feel really hard to get out of, and we kind of just sit and ruminate on the failure instead of looking for a way to move through it. This approach can lead us to shut down or seek out methods of numbing how we're feeling, because the negative emotions that we can bring on while we're kind of in this shame rumination spiral can feel like too much to handle. So the next time you fail at something, I want you to try this instead. Ask yourself, what can I learn from this? Instead of punishing yourself for it, celebrate the fact that you have the opportunity to learn something new. Think about the person you'll be on the other side of this, who will be better off because they've gained some knowledge in this area. I'll give you another example. So, I'm a registered nurse. I work full-time in the community, and I have for several years now. And when I first started out my career, I mean, throughout my career, I think as most people, I've made mistakes here and there. And I've had people reach out to me with constructive criticism on how I can repair these mistakes. And I remember really early on in my career, if someone had to reach out to me to correct something or provide me with constructive feedback, I would immediately slip into this kind of anxiety, shame, self-loathing kind of spiral, and I wasn't really moving through it in a really constructive way. I almost wasn't hearing their criticism in a constructive way. I found I really got stuck in this kind of panic of, oh my God, I'm a failure, I'm not doing anything right, I'm never going to succeed in this career. What am I going to do? And it became this spiral that I would just kind of sit and marinate in, and it didn't do anything productive. So as time went on, I learned to kind of approach these situations a little bit differently. So when people would come to me with constructive criticism, which really was very valuable and it was a chance for me to grow, I decided to stop looking at it from this lens of anxiety and shame and, self-loathing, and instead ask myself, what can I learn from this? So if someone reached out to me with feedback about how I can improve or a mistake that I made, instead of slipping into this spiral, I got curious. This shift in mindset made feedback a lot easier to take on without feeling personally attacked, because at the end of the day, it's not an attack on your character as a person. When people give you constructive feedback, they are genuinely just trying to help make you a better person, help you show up a little bit better for what you're doing. And when you approach it from a lens of curiosity, you're able to really take it on the way that it was intended. So instead of feeling personally attacked, it allowed me to be introspective and seek to understand how I can improve on this in the future. And in contrast on how I'd been feeling before, instead of me feeling this kind of sense of dread and panic for what my future could be because I didn't feel like I was capable, it made me feel excited because I knew if I was in a similar situation in the future, I am now better equipped to manage it than I was before. So the final thing that I think is really helpful for approaching failure in a different way is to treat failure as evidence that you're growing. If you're willing to treat failure as an opportunity to improve, it can be such a powerful tool to help us reach new heights and excel beyond our current circumstance. Begin to seek out failure as evidence that you are growing and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. When we make this positive association with failure in our minds, it will slowly begin to shift the feelings that it brings up. If we're able to reframe failure as a positive, constructive thing, instead of bringing up shame, fear, and anxiety, it'll bring up more positive emotions such as curiosity, excitement, and compassion. Reducing negative emotions around failure will make us less likely to avoid it, because it will allow us to lean into new territory without letting fear of failure hold us back. So I think these are all really helpful things to keep in mind. Try to reframe your thinking around failure. It really isn't something that we need to avoid anymore. It creates this incredible opportunity for you to better yourself. And if it's something that you're willing to lean into, there is so much potential for you on the other side. And so I have some homework for you. My goal for you this week, I want you to go and fail at something. I want you to make that your goal. Find something that you're not familiar with, something that you are maybe not particularly good at, and go fail at it. See what you learn along the way. And let me know how you failed by sharing it on your Instagram and tagging me at Mindset Gym Pod so I can celebrate the failure with you. And that's what I've got for you today. If you're still listening, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you in the next episode.